Issue 62, Combat Patrol, the paint issue. And we were doing so well. Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games, and today we're looking at issue 62 of Hachette Collection's Combat Patrol. Now this is a paint issue. It comes with Caliban Green and Wild Rider Red. Now the nice thing about paint issues, of course, is that it gives room for lots of lore. So in this particular issue, of course, you start off with a how to paint guide, and you can use the Wild Rider Red, which is a kind of very bright red, to highlight your Aldari models from earlier on. But it also allows you to highlight different aspects of your Space Marine. So this is going back to a fairly early start in your collection that you can kind of add little finishing touches just to make the minis pop that a little bit more, such as the red helmet here on the Space Marine Sergeant, and even here on the old Space Marine Chaplain on the Space Bike. You have here, of course, you've got some Leagues of Votan where you can kind of touch up on them, and even on the Tyranids. So the Wild Rider Red especially is a good little kind of paint to put on different aspects. Now there's nothing here with the Caliban Green, but nevertheless you'll probably get to use that later on, and of course it's still a work in progress for some of your other little minis. So such as the Magus in the last issue you can actually highlight some of the red on her robe with the Wild Rider Red. You have here the Path to Ascension. So this is a cool little bit of lore again for the Gene Stealer cultists, which would be kind of known. What they are is they're a cult. They're an infection that would take part in a society. So years or decades before a Tyranid fleet comes to devour a world, they would sort of seed the world with a kind of an infection of parasites, which would kind of turn into the Gene Stealer cults. So it's a kind of an infestation that's very hard to root out in Imperial society. So you would have it in different stages. You have the infection and infiltration, where the Gene Stealers, although small in number, would start kind of putting themselves into positions of high society and able to kind of influence and kind of make sure that more and more people are infected and that the cult remains hidden. Then you have the insurrection, where the cult starts to kind of make guerrilla attacks and kind of start impeding troop movement, things like that, because they know a Tyranid High Fleet is coming. And then you have the actual invasion of the Tyranid High Fleet, which is when they kind of go into full-out insurrection to try and sabotage the Imperial planet from being able to defend themselves. Now, the sad thing is they think that they're preparing for the arrival of the Star Children, which is kind of a deity which is going to come in and rescue them. That's not the case. It's just the deity they worship is just the Tyranid High Fleet, which is going to go in and eat them. So the poor cultists don't realize that they're just lunch. You have a cool little aspect here on heavy vehicles. So you have the new famous Imperium battle tank called the Rogel Dorn, which is named after the Primarch, which is one of the newer, cooler tank models. You have the Chaos Predator, which is kind of a cool, not a throwback, because an awful lot of the Chaos Space Marines would be veterans of the original war, so they'd be over 10,000 years old, but time and warp travels differently. So it's a slightly retro kind of aspect where they're still, say, on tracks and they're kind of still close to the kind of the 30k type of look. But they have a classic kind of cool look with the Chaos Predators. You have the Primaris Repulsors, which are a new model that have been brought out, that instead of being on threads like the Chaos Predators, are on kind of a hover tank, and these have been developed by a character called Belisarius Call, who has actually finally brought innovation to the Imperium. And you have the Aldari Fire Prisms, which would be just the most technically advanced of them all. You have here Emity of Hope, which again is a nice little bit of fiction going on about the Gene Stealer cultists. And you have two little campaigns in this issue. You have the Space Marines versus the Leagues of Votan, and you have the Tyranids versus the Leagues of Votan. And of course, a little bit of blurb here for Combat Patrol, with the next issue having the Acolyte Hybrids. So as you can see here, this is Generation 1 and 2 of the Gene Stealer cultists, because you would have successive generations. They start off looking very much like Gene Stealers, and then they start to kind of breed and intermingle with humans, and so over successive generations they slowly become more and more human looking. So it's generally done over 4 generations. This is Generation 1 and 2, where you see that they still very much look like Tyranids and Gene Stealer cultists or excuse me, they still look more like Tyranids than Genestealer cultists because they have extra arms and all these other bits and pieces. But in generation 3 or 4, they start to look a lot more human, and in some cases pass for actual human. But these are the characters that you're getting in the next issue. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issue 61 of Hachette Collections Combat, 62 of Hachette Collections Combat Patrol, which comes with 2 cool little paints, the Caliban Green, which is a good little paint, and Wild Rider Red, which is a nice little layer paint. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and until next time, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll, signing off.